From the years 1983 to 1989, Reverend Stanley Hoffman and his wife Marion were serving as missionaries in Uganda. And it was during that time where a civil war just was raging on. And all in all, that war took over 1 million lives. Every night, people's screams could be heard. And that meant that people were being robbed. And you couldn't resist, because if you did, their lives would be taken. Everyone knew never to walk at night. Definitely not alone, but really not at all, because there were roadblocks that were manned by rebels or just mean soldiers. But the Reverend talks about there were so many times where he, his wife, and the ones that lived there in the compound that they were protected. Once during a coup, there were bullets that came towards Hoffman and his wife Marion. They were on the patio of their front porch, and things just started flying. He describes how the city of Kampala was just lawless. I mean, it came second only to Beirut at the time in terms of lawlessness. Dogs would just bark constantly all night long because of the barrage of gunfire. Stanley and Marion themselves, they lived in question every day, wondering, are we next? Well, one night, Marion's praying and she asked God, Lord, would you send me a sign that you are going to protect us? Well, that same night, it was a few minutes past midnight, and they had a watchman that stayed up all night to guard the property and, let people know if something happened. Well, the watchman, he sees animals from afar entering into the compound. The watchman says they looked like they were possibly horses, and on each horse there was a rider. Some of them stopped right near the front gate, far off, but the others kind of continued on, coming about halfway up through the yard. Well, as they neared closer and closer, the watchman says they just disappeared. The watchman decides to sit down in his chair because he had stood up when he saw this occurring. He wanted to get a better look, so he sits down. He says the horses and the riders reappear, but this time when they reappear, they're stacked too deep. So there's so many of them. So this watchman's like, oh my gosh. So naturally he stands back up to try to get a better look. But when he stands up, they disappear again. Well, in the morning, this watchman has to go right to the Reverend because he's like, I gotta let him know what happened. 1, 2, he asks for an interpretation from the Reverend. Like, what does this mean? What was this vision? And the Reverend took it and told the watchman that, it seems to possibly be a sign that God is protecting us. He allowed you to see the possible guardian angels that were and are encamped around our compound. In addition, Marion's listening in on this, and she was happy because she took it as the sign she had asked for the night before. A sign that God was going to protect them. There came another time when the couple were in Uganda where Stanley had to go out of town for a week. So he was like in the southwestern part of Uganda, and Marion had to stay back, at the compound. And there came a night where Marion was awakened at 4:30 a.m. And what woke her was the tapping on the guest window. It was the watchman. The reason why he didn't come to her bedroom window is it faced the front gate where people came in and out. So he didn't want to be seen, so he goes around to the other side, and it wakes her up and she comes to the window. He tells her there's 2 guys with guns at the front gate. She goes to take a peek because they had a security light that lit up in one portion. So she goes, she looks out, she sees, and sure enough, far off, she sees the men trying to come up over the gate and crouch low. So Marion quickly grabs the whistle. They had a whistle in their home. She goes to the kitchen, and the way this story described it, I couldn't picture it in my head, but apparently the kitchen faced the house that was right above them. She lays it on that whistle. You see, because the house that was right above them, right near there, had a security guard at night. and she was hoping to get that guard's attention so that he could come to her aid. However, she didn't get a response. So Marion goes back to her bedroom because she's got a good view of the front, and she takes a peek out. And the two gunmen are crouched and slowly but surely getting closer and closer to the house. So immediately she goes into prayer, and she's asking God for his protection. And as all this is going on, she's praying. The watchman is actually crouched around the corner of the garage, and he's just got his eyes glued on these two gunmen. He wants to make sure he knows where they're going. Once they get about halfway through, they stop abruptly. They turn around, quickly scurry out of there, jump over the gate, and disappear into the night. The watchman is left there crouched by the garage, and he's wondering, what the heck? Why did they just turn and run? A few days after this occurred, Stanley comes back from his trip, and Marion tells him everything that went down. It was an absolute miracle that they were not robbed that night, or even worse. The couple just said a prayer together, and they thanked God for that protection. And later that evening, it's dark, Stanley goes out front. He sees 4 figures, and they're wearing white. They're in between him and the front gate, about halfway up the yard. And he saw that these 4 figures, they're like intently watching, almost like they're guarding. Stanley keeps staring because he's like, wow, what am I seeing here? So he's staring intently to try to focus in even more. But then the figures disappear. And they didn't just disappear really quickly. He said it's like they faded away. He then sees off in the distance, close to the front gate, he sees 2 figures in black. They're climbing over the gate now, and they're crouching and trying to come up close. Once they get about halfway up into the yard, all crouching through the dark, they stop, and the white figures come back into view. They were right there, standing in front of the 2 figures in black. Those 2 turn, flee, run back up over the fence, and disappear into the night. It dawned on Stanley right then in that moment. He knew without a shadow of a doubt those were angels. And he praised God in that moment for what he was seeing, for their protection. He said he wanted so badly, like, to go up to the angels to thank them for that protection. But he couldn't move. He said his whole body was just almost, it was like he was frozen in awe. He knew that God allowed him to see that, gave him a vision to put his mind at ease and let him know that they were protected. Those 2 men in black were definitely gunmen, and they were there to steal, like they went around to all the houses. It was just complete, as I said, lawlessness. But each time they tried, they couldn't get halfway up the yard. And so all during their time in Uganda, they had that protection. They were safe, and they were able to return safely back at the end of their missionary stint, I guess you could say. But what an incredible story. I hope to hear their testimony was a blessing to you guys. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching, and I am going to see you guys for the next one.